A good afternoon and welcome to everybody this afternoon. A good afternoon and welcome to everybody this afternoon to another exciting afternoon at live at the watering hole. And this afternoon we are starting off at Old Donyo in Kenya. And over here we're starting off with one of our favorite creatures, the elephants. Some big elephant bulls, a little bit of a tussle going on with two. It looks like that one on the left on his own, slightly larger. And that's why maybe he's not so interested in the other two's tussle. It almost looks like they gave him the right of way. You can see they're just settling in. Looks like they might be spending a bit of time here, so interesting to see what might happen. And as we know, of course, watering holes are meeting places, especially the middle of the day. This is where these animals meet up and where we see some good interaction. My name is Jaapie Potgieter and I am going to be your host this afternoon. Looks like we're in for some good action around the watering hole. It's a hot day here where I'm from in the central low-veld area of South Africa, and it looks like in Kenya at El Donyo as well. Another elephant coming in. Now it's interesting to note that these elephants all have signs on them of water or wetness, that they've used water. And I think that when it's hot like this, if they are in the area, there's a very good chance we'll see them at one of our watering holes at least. But looks like these guys are having some good fun here. Now, this afternoon, I would like to remind our viewers that we are doing a live and interactive show. So please join the conversation. And you can join us on the app. You can also join us from various other platforms. And you can let us know what you'd like to chat about. You can let us know if there's anything in particular, anything you would like to know more about. There you go. At the bottom of the screen, wildearth.tv/questions. Or you can scan the QR code there on the bottom right of the screen. And that's where you can join. You can also, if there's anything, any past conversations that you want to continue about, you can join us from X as well. You can use hashtag WildEarth and then just post comments, even if you're just saying hello. And have a look. I think that elephant's looked like he's had enough. Spent enough time waiting, anxious to get into the water and cool down. And probably also asserting a bit of authority to one of his travel companions. But you can see it's all in good faith. That elephant turned around and there's no sign of aggression there. I think it's just a casual move and an understanding that water needs to be shared. Aha. So our first comment of the afternoon is from Ari. Good to hear from you, Ari. Good morning or afternoon to everybody, and greetings from Amersfoort in the Netherlands. A good afternoon to you too, Ari. Very good to have you join this afternoon. Looks like we're in for some excitement. There's a giraffe coming in from the back, so let's see what the situation will develop into and how long it will wait. Or she, I think it's a he. And then from Penelope Kenyon, you're saying hello everyone at Wild Earth and Watchers. And you say that you're just back from a long beach walk after a sunrise safari and you're ready for the calming watering holes. Very happy to hear that, Penelope. And indeed, what a way to spend the heat of the day. Well, for us and those of us watching calmly from a shaded spot, hopefully can watch what these animals are getting up to. Regarded as the quieter period of the day normally in safari, it's interesting to see just how active animals are. And these two culprits that we're seeing on the screen now, the giraffe and the elephant, known as two of the large mammals, notorious for having very little sleep in 24 hours. A lot of the time spent feeding and of course also cooling down in certain areas. Darcy Miller, you're saying good afternoon. Good afternoon to you too, Darcy. I hope you enjoy the show this afternoon. You can almost sense the anxiousness in that giraffe that just attempted the oxpeckers on his neck. You can see they're all just carefully waiting there on the shoulders for that moment the giraffe lowers its head. Give them that pause to go and try and see what they can find in and around the tougher areas, the ears, around the eyes. Giraffes, of course, sometimes forcing their whole faces into the trees that they feed on. It often brings about quite a bit of ectoparasites. But those birds help them clean. And what a magnificent partnership between these two creatures. And often regarded as beneficial to both species, but funnily enough a little bit parasitic. And the bird is the one that benefits in a little way. Like if the animal also has a cut or an injury, then the bird will go after the blood, and that's mainly what they're after, blood, bodily fluids. And hence they go after the ticks, because the ticks consume the blood, and of course that's what ends up being their meal. Penelope Kenyon, you're also saying that you're hoping that we see one ton again today. I'm hoping so too. He gave us quite the show yesterday. But it was only him. So maybe the fact that he's not around today, maybe that might mean that we might see a little bit more. Interesting, these elephants, like while they're cooling down, you can see they're standing with its feet in the water here. And funnily enough, elephants do actually have some sweat glands, and some of it is positioned just above the toenails on the foot. Quite an odd spot. So definitely a worthwhile spot to cool down. I'm sure it also aids in a little bit of relaxation. Having to carry all that weight, perfectly designed to carry a very heavy animal. If you had to look at an x-ray of the elephant's foot, it would look like he's walking up on his toes. Quite funny. It would have looked quite funny if the elephant wasn't physically adapted the way it is. It's also got this thick pad of cartilage and fat It provides a cushion under the heel part, provides them with those rounded feet that spreads the weight evenly, and it also provides them with their stealthiness. Elephants are extremely stealthy, and for those of you that's had the fortunate encounter with an elephant, know they can be very noisy, and then they can also be very, very sneaky, very quiet when they move through an area. Gary Scott, good morning to you in Manchester. And you're asking if this park is near Cape Town. So, Gary, this is in Kenya, and it's an East African country, a little bit further away from Cape Town. Cape Town being right at the tip of South Africa, the country right at the tip of Africa. So quite a bit of distance. And this area, Kenya especially, well known as a wildlife haven and very, very popular among safari goers. And I've got a question from Picasso. Picasso's asking, or saying hi to you, Picasso. And I really do appreciate your questions, Picasso. They do make me think and make me realize also that I do have quite a bit to learn about certain things. It's funny how the longer you do this, the more you realize how much you got to learn. But your question for the day is, you're saying that the mammal has an external ear and 3 ossicles, which is true. And then you're asking, but what does a bird hear with? And that is a very good question. Birds, even though it doesn't look like they have external ears, they certainly have ears as well, and they can hear quite well, hence their communication. Even though their ears are mainly internal, they do have openings on the side of the head that we can't see, some of them. But interesting, some birds are quite uniquely adapted, like owls for instance. Owls are often accredited as birds with exceptional eyesight, and yes, they do have exceptional eyesight, but they also use their hearing. And funnily enough, their ears are actually spaced unequally, not right opposite each other. So often when you do see an owl looking at you, and if you have the privilege of witnessing a situation like this, the bird will rotate its head and kind of gauge where you're at. And that's mainly because they're trying to pinpoint sound. And often you'll find lots of birds of prey and owls especially, they hunt things that can be tough to see, rodents for instance, hiding in the tall grass. Have a look. Here's this giraffe coming down, so let's see if the oxpeckers, there they go, right in for the area around the eyes, the ears. Looks like that giraffe's trying somewhat to get it to deal with the itchiness. The bird's clamoring in the ear. You can see there's 2 birds in the ear. I'm assuming that areas are prone to collecting quite a bit of ectoparasites or ticks. Other thing is also giraffes, known as one of their favorite food sources, especially in this region around Oldonyo here. You can see all the thorn trees around. You have these very, very sharp thorns and branches, and sometimes they do tend to nip themselves or have a little cut or a scrape. That will also attract some of the ticks to move up that way, but also the birds. So all around, good opportunity to seize. And we'll see now with the other one. We might witness the same. But to get back to Picasso's question, Picasso, I am not 100% clued up with the exact hearing mechanisms of birds, and definitely something that I'll have to do a bit more research on. But a very interesting question. And yeah, indeed, they do hear with their ears though, even though it's not externally visible. So, we've got another question from Carla2275. You're saying hi to everybody, and you're saying you're also watching from Sydney in Australia. And then you're asking if the watering holes that dry out are filled up by humans, or does the rain fill them up? So, Carla, that's a good question. It depends. It depends on the area, and it's quite interesting how the season affects the water levels in the different areas, and of course because of that the movement of the animals as well. And what I've noticed is I've actually seen quite a difference in certain areas. You'll be surprised. It depends on the soil often, how well the area holds its surface water. For instance, this area in the Southern African lowveld, not a lot of surface water, hence the watering holes dry out towards the end of the dry season, and they are left. That way it's also part of the water management. There's a lot of thought being put into water management, and it's a vital part of the management of these wild spaces. It determines game movements, it determines sightings, and because of that it affects tourism. If tourism is the intended land use for making a profit off the wild lands, of course wild spaces need to have value, and the people living around them need to benefit from them. And they are very, very valuable. There's no question about that. You can see those giraffes seized the moment, but it looks like there's a thirsty elephant coming in, casually strolling towards the water. Doesn't look desperate. Doesn't have that bobbing head of an animal desperate to get to drink, but also a nice mature elephant bull coming in here. We're very spoiled in this region for the specimens of elephants coming in, and we still have this one-tusked elephant hanging around. He's clearly taking this time to properly enjoy the water. Have a look there, elephant just testing the heat, maybe just also dusting off the tip of his trunk. But Carla, back to your question. So some of these watering holes, like this one here at Old Onyo, they are pumped. So they have a pump with usually a solar pump nowadays, or other, and they function in a manner where they literally just keep it full. So it's not to waste water, it's just to have enough to attract animals to certain areas. And then other watering holes are left completely for nature to take its course, but they manage in the sense that they are created as catchment areas during the rain season, so that there's at least some water throughout the beginning part of the dry season, which is important for game movements in areas relying on tourism. But of course, if you pump water regularly in certain areas, if it's very, very dry and you do have a lot of animals moving through, and you might find that it affects the ecosystem. Too much movement, of course, can lead to a little bit of environmental degradation due to overgrazing or elephant impact. If elephants know that there's water in one area found throughout the year, then the elephant, being very clever, knows where to get water when it gets dire, and it means it'll move there regularly, spend a lot of time around there, and of course that will affect the area quite a bit. And then Lane is asking how long crocodiles sleep for, and do they sleep underwater? Lane, that is an excellent question. I don't think they sleep underwater. I know hippos can fall asleep and then they have an involuntary reflex to have them drift up to the water surface, but crocodiles can keep their breath for a very, very long time under the water. If they do not do too much and they don't exert a lot of energy, they can stay in some cases longer than an hour, but it depends on the activity. But I do not know how long they sleep, and I don't know to what extent they sleep. Also a very good question. Something interesting to do a bit of research on. And then I've got a question from Canine Girl saying, well, not a question, a comment, and a good morning's wishing to everybody, saying happy Sunday and beautiful scenes to start the day. Indeed it is. Look how very peacefully these two elephants are enjoying this watering hole side by side. You can see respect shared between these animals, of course, knowing very well that water is vitally important on a hot day. And Mr. H from UAE 87, he's saying this one tusk was named Lobolo. Interesting, thank you for that, Mr. H. I did not know that myself, but I know I have seen him around here. Have a look at him just investigating this incoming elephant. Oh, that was quite an abrupt greeting. It was almost, that's amazing how these elephants just kind of sense that and anticipated reaction there. Now you can see the other two paying attention to each other. And then just a bit of standing. Standing. What seems to us like standing, you might just bet these elephants are literally just collecting information from their surrounding areas. The elephant obviously lifting his head to drink, but also scanning the horizon. Amazing how well animals utilize time, and what might seem to us like literally just standing around doing nothing. They don't waste a minute of the day, really. It is a constant endeavor to survive out here. You can see that giraffe in the background also casually chewing its cud. Now, this is quite the specimen that's just come in. Some decent tusks there. And it looks like, as Mr. H called them, Lobolo moving off, or away from the water at least. And have a look. It's always funny to watch. That elephant in the middle of these three looks a little bit younger. And I do find sometimes you'll see the younger ones carefully watching the others, especially if there's larger ones, just carefully monitoring their movement. There's of course social interest from these males in each other. And it might also be that some of the males move into an area and that haven't been there before, and even though they're aware of each other's presence, it's always like a respectful greeting that might happen from a little bit of a distance. But there's always a bit of a social dynamic going on here. But it looks like it's been very busy. You can see there's lots of water spilled around the edges. I can see elephants. It's waiting in the distance in the shade of that big, what seems like a flat crown or umbrella thorn. Not sure exactly of the species. But here at Aldonia, oh, and there that elephant's pushed off the giraffe. Elephants, not always the most accommodating of neighbors, but still very, very interesting to watch. Nonetheless, sometimes creating a bit of havoc. Yeah. Well, while these elephants are settling in for their midday cool off, I think let's have a look and see what's happening at Lentore. Baboons, of course, and have a look at them. They always look like they're up to something, even though they're just enjoying the water. There's something in the water, of course, that's drawn their attention. Sitting in the shade on a hot day, wouldn't be surprised if it's just a water inlet. I know for many of us, watching baboons can be highly entertaining, and this troop has certainly showed itself over the last week or so to be extremely busy. Lots happening. You can see a couple of these females, so when the females go and heat like that one there, trying to draw the attention of the males, the backside swells up and becomes this bright pink bulge, and you'll often see the males following them. That's what a female looks like when it's not in heat, and that of course is because she's got a little one. It looks like something spooked her there, or something made her move. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but have a look. There's another female with an older young one drinking, and you can see those two big males sitting off to the right, casting a casual eye towards the female in heat. So it will be interesting to see if they might move. Have a look. There we go. Interesting behavior there. Literally lured him away there, even though he seemed quite content here at the water's edge. You can see the difference in the ages of these two baboons. A little one climbing on his mother's back and riding off. Oh, and have a look at that baboon. That's quite an interesting baboon. It looks like... I saw the big baboon next to the water. Looks like he's got an interesting scar on his face, if I'm looking correctly. I'm a bit out of focus. There we go. So John Alexander is saying hello all and good morning from Canada. Good morning to you, John, there in Canada, and a good afternoon from our side here in South Africa. And I hope you will find the antics of this baboon troop just as entertaining as some of us do. Joan Mello asking what is the gestation period of a baboon. Joan, a baboon generally about 6 months. And then they give birth to a little one, and of course when that little one's born into a social hierarchy connected to the level of the mother. In the first few months, maybe even the first little while, up until a year or so, just over, it's quite carefree. Look at this baboon carefully slurping up the water, but still keeping an eye out, always making sure what's happening around. Oh, and there we go, another baboon in the background, some baboons mating. It looks like that female managed to get the male to mate with her. She looked quite adamant. We'll just have a look at them all sitting very, very relaxed in the shade. And that is a very big male baboon having a drink there. The baboon to the right does look like there's some damage or healed scar right on the tip of the nose. And even though he looks like quite a large male, it might be a scar that he bears from a fight that he's had, potentially for position within the social rank. And often you find that some of these baboons, if they've lost a severe fight, they do tend to hang back a little bit. And then Spasiankov is asking if I've ever seen hammerkop chicks before outside of the nests. Spas, I haven't actually. I have not managed to get a view of hammerkop chicks outside of the nest. Something I'm going to put on my bucket list. I've seen many nests. I've seen the hammerkops at the nests, but never the hammerkops outside. Sure. There we've got... we had a rather clear view there. A little bit out of focus currently, but it was quite clear that this baboon's got quite a scar on the nose, and that looks like something that's healed up by now. It was definitely quite badly damaged at one point. And it looks like even some teeth exposed there. And it's amazing how the scars and injuries like this tell the stories of these animals. Being quite large, there's no doubt that this baboon is definitely had one or two battles, but also probably been put in his place, hence that scar. It's a reminder of how brutal some of these altercations can be, and for a baboon it can be quite irritating. You can see there, I can see some flying insects, and of course the hand getting raised to the snout every now and again. Probably a bit of an irritation, but I mean, I don't think it should. Oh, look at that, quite interesting. I want to go sit with his feet up against a tree, head facing the tree. Not uncommon for primates. Also helps them cool down a little bit. A little bit of relief from the heat. But interesting to watch him put his nose right up against the tree. So, while they laze around here in the shade, let's go see what's happening at Victoria Falls this afternoon. Aha. And we have a vulture frenzy. This is always very, very special to see. Today is quite a hot day. You can see the sun's out in full force. You can see the deep shady patches covered by the mopani trees. And even though the birds came into the open for some feeding and the food that they got given, you can see they're moving back and away from the heat of the ground. Of course, those bare patches of soil get baked to the point where they become very, very hot. And it is quite hot near the soil surface, so that's why sometimes birds and those creatures that can try and take a little bit of relief by getting a bit of height and exposing themselves to the prevailing breeze. And it looks like there is one here indeed. You can see the tops of the trees moving. But yeah, you can see some of them rounding in and around the shade. So this is quite an interesting situation we're seeing here. So they've been fed and now they are moving away, and we can see, you'll see some of them clearly taking that run up needed for these big birds to lift themselves up. Now, these white-backed vultures, especially extremely large birds, it takes a lot of effort and energy to get a bird like this up in the sky. You can see there some of them drinking. Looks like a few younger ones in and amongst the older ones. The ones often, those ones with the white downy color down the neck, now the younger birds. And then of course the older ones have the more grey necks. And there's some hooded vultures in and amongst, picking up whatever little scraps is left. You can see that barren soil there. It must turn very, very hot, especially this time of the day, and around the area of Victoria Falls, no doubt. But the heat also provides these birds with an opportunity. We know that they are very, very heavy and therefore require lots of energy. You can see those massive wings needed to lift them off the ground. And of course, when it's very hot, some of that hot air rises from the Earth's surface, and this creates an uplift that of course takes the birds up and helps them. It aids them a little bit, gives them a bit of a boost, so to say, and that's where they can conserve their energy, can conserve their wing beats, and they kind of just saw with these thermals, as they're known. And then we can see over there that vulture's opening up his wings, exposing his back to the sunlight. All you can see is a little bit of feather manipulation and grooming in there. Now that not only helps this bird with cooling down, breeze coming through, but it also, feathers are extremely interesting anatomical structures, and they help with insulation, and they can also help with conducting heat. So when these birds expose their backs open to the sunlight like that, what you might find sometimes is that those feathers can get extremely hot, even though it doesn't affect the bird itself directly, being spaced a little bit away from the body, and that enables them to control parasites, being scavenging birds, feeding off decaying and dead animals. They do pick up a lot of parasites, and that helps them maintain the health of their feathers. Lady Macbeth, you are saying there are some vultures which cannot take off from the ground level. I'm not aware of any of the African vultures that cannot take off from the ground level, but I do know that there is a bit of difference between the Southern African and, well, the African or Old World vultures and the New World vultures. I know some of the New World vultures are huge, and they are often found way up on high cliffs and ridges where they literally drop into the prevailing thermals. And these big birds do need a bit of assistance. As you can see, this marabou, interestingly, doing a little bit of a balancing act there on the very, very bendable Mupani branch. Bill open, also a sign that it's very, very hot here, and the bird helping the bird to control his body temperature that way. You can see some of the birds basking there, and imagine being a vulture feeding off dead animals. Such a big bird. Feathers are extremely important for these birds to maintain, and being such a large bird, you can see the length of those primary feathers there on the bird with the stretched out wings. It is quite a mission. It takes up quite a lot of time. Sandy Franklin, good morning to you too. You're saying good morning to myself and to Mika, so good morning to Mika as well. And then Ollie the Oxpecker. Good afternoon to you, Ollie. Love the name. Ollie the Oxpecker. It's amazing to see how these very large birds are spread out on this small little crown of the Mopani tree. You can see as they're moving how the branches are moving. It's quite bendable, and it looks like it might have just flown up to literally get off from the ground. Still a few on the ground looking around for whatever scraps. Now, a lot of the behavior of vultures and a lot of the carcasses that they go to, often they use their sight, or they're well known to be using their sight to find food, especially in Africa. And they've got an incredible eyesight, being able to spot carcasses from miles away. And other vultures. Of course, they also follow the movement of other vultures. And just like vultures do, so do predators. Predators also learn to follow the movement of vultures. So interestingly enough, you might have had the chance to see some of Africa's larger predators feed. Sometimes you'll see that they do stare up in the sky and they look around, especially if there's vultures around. And yes, it is safe to say that lions can bird, do some birding, at least to some extent, able to distinguish between vultures, and to a degree even between certain vultures. And here we've got two of the well-known species in southern Africa. The hooded vulture, both of those, one with a pink face there on the left and the one on the right is a younger one. Now these vultures, it's got a slender bill, a little bit weaker than the large white-backed vulture, and of course it's because they have a variance in their diet, but they're also slightly smaller and very, very good at reading the behaviors of predators, and they are often some of the first to find carcasses on the ground. Now what I've seen in the past, and I've even heard this from some of the trackers that I have had the privilege of working with in the past, where they, in some areas, the trackers generally, they would say if there's not a hooded vulture, then you wouldn't necessarily have something to go and follow up on to see if there is a carcass. White-backed vultures being very large, they need large dead trees or open trees which enable them to land easily and take off easily. Hence you often find them that in areas, if there's not a lot of other big trees around, they might just sit in some of the dead trees, and if there is a few around, they tend to congregate, because one dead tree, if there's more space, it's a good spot. And obviously when these birds fly around and look out for food, when they need to rest, they often look for good spots to perch, and some of them might already be occupied. Spasiankov, you asking how we would recognize a male and female hooded vulture. Spas, that's a good question. You can't really recognize the difference. It is something that you'll have to have an in-depth look at, and often a hands-on approach, but they are very, very difficult to distinguish between in the field. Excuse me. And just have a look at that. What is that tree? That looks like a magnificent tree, a very, very large tree. You can see the marabou and the vultures right at the top. And very, very important, the large trees, to the survival of these animals or these birds. Also spaces that they use for nesting, and hence often the numbers too, well, increasingly more and more research now into factors driving the decline of vultures within certain areas, especially South Africa, shows that they are very heavily reliant on tall trees, often found in intact riverine systems and some of the wild systems that they are found in. Now, I think this was quite a good little check-in to see how the vultures are doing. But while they over here, look at that serene pan there. I think let's head over to Founders and see what's happening there. And from 3 iconic species to another iconic species, the Hadida ibis, in the famous dead tree at Founders Lodge watering hole. That tree's got so much character, even though I've never seen anything in it. So this is my first, and who else other than the Hadida ibis to occupy it? Resilient birds, very adaptable. Found all throughout South Africa. And even though they might look a little dull from here, they are quite pretty. Very beautiful bird up close. Often found near water. And also a regular visitor to gardens throughout South Africa. You can see it looks slightly windy here, and today a little bit overcast, so you can see the feathers rising up and down of that bird on the left as he's preening and reorganizing his feathers. Trying to balance himself up there. Oh, what a good vantage point. Not sure what tree it is. It looks dead from where I am. And it looks like there's also quite a bit of lichen growing on it. But I have another question from Lady Macbeth, or a comment saying that you need a lappet-faced vulture to open a carcass. That is indeed true, Lady Macbeth, especially the tougher carcasses, lappet-faced vultures. But what's interesting is, even though a lot of these vultures do scavenge and they rely on things to pass away in nature, and then they do the cleanup process. They are also designed to not directly compete with each other, so it's not uncommon sometimes, especially here in the low veld of South Africa. I've seen 5 of our different vultures all together on one carcass, which is a magnificent sight, and they all go after different parts. And like Lady Macbeth's saying, sometimes the lappet-faced vultures are needed to open up the carcasses. The largest of our vultures also has the most robust build. But having said that, I've also seen the white-backed vultures, also quite a large bird, very robust, and the Cape vultures open up carcasses depending on what it is. So I don't think it's a case of always having to rely on the lappet face to open it up for them. The smaller, softer skinned animals can be opened. And then of course also all of them do to an extent rely on some of the larger predators if it's very, very thick skinned large animals, especially if a carcass is fresh. Vultures have a knack of finding the softer tissues within the dead animals and usually pulling at that and opening that. Here we've got a nice little view of the pan. You can see there's still lots of signs of large animals coming down to have a drink and a wallow. Signs of the rhinos that we saw yesterday, where that big rhino was laying down in the mud there, wallowing and relaxing. You can see extensive cloud cover over this area. Doesn't look like it's rained. But other than the hardy-does, not too much happening here now, so I think we're going to head back to Old Donyo, where I hear we've got some ellies and giraffes. And back in Kenya, what a different atmosphere or different climate. You can see elephants, lots of giraffe. Like this watering hole is starting to get busy now. Lots of doves coming in here as well. Seed-eating birds, often seen at the water's edge regularly. Bit more water than some of the other birds maybe. And it looks like there's a playful mood from some of these elephants, or an inquisitive mood rather. You can see at least two big elephants waiting in the shade at the back, and then of course the giraffe anxiously waiting their turn. And they look almost a little bit impatient, but of course there's quite a clear understanding of the natural hierarchy around here. And that one's decided to start chewing the cud. So let's see what this female does. But we were speaking about animals not wasting any time. You can see the elephants are playfully greeting each other. But I see there's a big male giraffe that's moved closer to that female, investigating, seeing if there might be any potential chance of her being in heat. Push and play there from these elephants, carefully spacing each other and assisting with the trunk just to not to hurt each other. Those tusks are quite sharp, and both of them being at lengths where they can easily injure each other. They are very careful. Oh, that's a quick swing of the head. Amazing how quickly these animals can turn around like that. Such a large animal. Now I recently, and I don't know, maybe some of you might have seen, but I've recently seen a video online of two elephant bulls fighting. And the interesting thing about this particular video I'm referring to, I'm not sure where it was taken, is that the one elephant, they're both very large bull elephants, but one elephant's got very large tusks and the other one quite short, sturdy tusks. And I have had the privilege of seeing a similar situation in person, and it was fascinating to watch. I literally spent about 2 hours with these two bulls fighting, and the one had much larger tusks, but they were spaced quite far apart. And I remember that the smaller of the two elephants with the smaller tusks, like there were points where I thought he got the upper hand, at least in a wrestling context. Like he definitely pushed the elephant with the larger tusks around a little bit more, even though it was quite closely matched. And eventually there was no clear winner. I think both of them went and kind of rested for a while aside. But what I noticed in this video is that the one with the shorter tusks, in fact one was broken off, like almost just a little bit protruding underneath the lip. You could clearly see that it was the dominant one within the fight compared to the one with the large tusks. So it was an interesting thing to see. And have a look. This male giraffe is definitely very interested in that female. You can see she is not too interested. Well, let's see. She's also not running away. And she's carefully moving around in circles. So enticing him more and more. And let's see what happens. That's a big, magnificent specimen of a giraffe bull. You can see the bulge protruding on the forehead there. Something quite iconic of these East African or Maasai giraffe. Sometimes it even looks like a third horn. And these guys, the one at this stage, very much an active competitor for mating rights. But let's see. See, there's a bit of a bulge on his tail as well. Not sure if it was from an injury or if it's just looking that way because of the way the sun's falling on it. You can see the female's not walking away. Now, what I'm trying to see here is if she's just impatiently standing around, having to deal with this guy's intrusion, I'd say, while awaiting her turn to drink from the elephants, or if she is not wanting to move away because there is some interest. I think maybe she's just hanging around for a drink of water and he's just curious. Spas Yankov is asking what animals I have seen elephants drinking peacefully with alongside the water. Spas, other elephants. Sometimes a herd of buffalo. I have witnessed elephants and some buffalo, especially if it's a large herd, where the elephants kind of, if it's a lone elephant, they might give right of way. But I've seen, even though they have very specific spaces that they drink, they keep their distance from the other species. But who's saying this is also what I've observed around quite large watering holes. Like with these smaller watering holes like this one, not many. Occasionally rhino. Usually if it's a younger elephant, older elephants, like the size of some of these bulls here, they become quite a pest to rhino around the watering hole. And then Canine Girl is asking if different species can tell when any female is in estrus. Indeed they can. Animals for the most part and birds have exceptional sense of smell. and they are able to not only communicate through the use of scent, but also able to pick up on minute chemical traces from hormones and the changing biology within females when they go into estrus. And animals can pick up on that, the male animals. For the most part, some mammals often do certain rituals, and they have certain known and well described behaviors, like for instance urine testing, where you might find, especially in the case of that giraffe we saw earlier, it might wait until the female urinates and then lick a little bit of it and then investigate through the use of the vomeronasal gland. It sits just above the palate, and through an action known as the phlegm and grimace, mammals pull up their lips, some mammals, large mammals, and then that action facilitates the opening of a small little opening right in the palate of the animal, and that creates a suction motion that draws minute traces of chemical elements, and they can analyze that, and which would tell an animal whether a female is in heat or not. Just have a look at that. All of that, you can see the grass moving, you can see what is a dove of some kind. Oh, looked like an emerald spotted wood dove when it was taking off. I saw the amber color on the wings, and some dried out elephant dung, dried and wet. Lots of elephant dung around here in various stages of decomposition, of course providing the opportunity for beetles and other insects to lay their eggs. Spasiankov is asking if there are any buffalo here at Old Onyo. I'm sure. Oh, okay, that's quite. I'll get back to Spas's question in a moment, but this is quite a interesting development. A secretary bird. This is spectacular. Let's have a look. Maybe you might use a puddle off to the side. Look at that giraffe just staring down. He's just as surprised as I am. Like, what is this? Not a commonly seen bird. What an amazing looking creature. What a spectacular bird of prey this. You can see those long padded legs. Looks like he's wearing and a quick drink of water, like raptors do. Kind of just a gulp and then checking around again. Probably very aware that watering holes like this might be the stalking grounds of predators. And even though this bird is a formidable hunter of its own, of course they do fall prey to certain creatures like cats. This is spectacular to see. Amazing that these giraffes are also giving it its fair space. You can see that female just staring back and forth between the bird and the water. The bird came in and made a cameo. What a good sighting. That's a good one for the list for Live at the Watering Hole, for those of you. First one for me. Now, I've just been informed that there have been two at one point. put it around. Not sure if that's the same one there at the back or a different one. So I'm very happy that they're starting to make their way back. It must mean that there is good grass cover in the area, good opportunities to hunt. And of course trees like those flat grounds there in the back provide good nesting opportunities for these birds, often using the same nest again and again. You can see those long legs, designed to two species with long legs. Funny watching a long-legged bird through the long legs of a tall giraffe. And let's see, we're gonna get a good frame there. Oh, that is spectacular. Giraffe head coming down and a secretary bird through the gap of two giraffe. Now interesting, this bird is a avid hunter of reptiles, other things as well, but snakes in particular, and they use those long legs, padded long legs, and they've got very sharp, strong, powerful talons, and they use that to actually kick and subdue their prey before picking them up, killing them and eating them. Sometimes they do kill them, but that is spectacular. And this bird, the way it does its hunting is through walking through large open patches. And that bird must also know very well that on hot days, even though this waterhole is maybe a little bit busy, reptiles also come towards the water. I've got another question from Picasso saying that my name is Milan, I'm 6 years old and want to know how old is the oldest elephant living now. Milan, I do not know. I think it would be hard to say, to be honest, especially out in the wild. There might be some really old elephants moving about that we're not aware of, but I do know that from the recorded ages, the oldest elephants were recorded to be in captivity. And I believe one Indian elephant, I'm not sure where, was recorded at an age of over 70. Where in the wild generally, I think some of the oldest members were near 60. But generally an elephant older than 50 to 55 in the wild is quite old. Maybe females a little bit older than males in some cases, but it's difficult to determine. And also in the wild these animals face a lot of realities related to their diets, especially as they get older, and that might affect their intake of food, and they often end up dying from natural causes. So tricky to say. Good question. But I think elephants in captivity, especially if they are fed a very specific, well-balanced diet, they don't have all the wear and tear of elephants in the wild, then it might affect their age and their development at a later stage. Then I've got a question from Sandy Franklin again, asking if I've ever been on foot and came upon an elephant, and what would I do? Or if you were on foot and came upon an elephant, what would you do? If you were on foot and came upon an elephant, I would quietly sit down in a nice shaded spot if I can, with a little bit of cover, make sure that I stay downwind. And if I am not downwind, I would move to be downwind, and then I would watch the animal, carefully watching and observing what it does, quietly, at a safe distance of course, and just enjoy it. Mainly enjoy it. It's a spectacular experience. If you had to surprise an elephant, there's a few things that you can do. Sometimes, depending on the situation, the animal often just turn tail and move out of there, in which case I would advise you to move to a position where you know that you've got safety. If the animal had to decide to change its mind somehow, or if it's trapped somehow, or if it might feel trapped. There's also the situation when elephants not, or an animal's not necessarily trapped, but they might feel trapped and their nervousness not realize and observe a way out of the situation. In that case, with elephants, there's quite a few. You can make yourself look bigger by waving yourself, standing upright, shouting if they do keep approaching. But it's important to stand your ground and not run. Although I also know people that's had the opportunity to have many encounters with elephants out in the wild, but I might tell you that there are points that you might have to run. But with an elephant, generally it's difficult to get away unless you have a sure safety perimeter. This has been spectacular this far. Lots of elephants coming down. You can see they're all just coming down to cool themselves down, and that seems to be the trend, just behind the ears, the belly. I think there's enough around, and then of course there's also a little bit of play and practice. These elephants are getting to that age. They still look young, these guys, but they're getting to that age where they might have to compete a little bit on a more serious level for mating rights. And what better way to do that than practice against the travel companions? Johan O is saying, wow, secretary birds are always a huge surprise to see. I agree, Johan. That was a very big surprise for me, and a very, very special surprise. Such a beautiful, majestic bird. And just casually strolling in and out. And Penelope Kenyon, you're saying that you were called secretary bird at the tennis club as the club sec. That is quite the name. I am sure that means that you were also quite the avid tennis player and very agile. And I'm not sure if you've seen a secretary bird before, especially if it's wrestling with a snake, but they are very, very athletic and capable. Spasiankov, you're asking in which other places we might see, or which other locations we might see secretary birds. And you said that it is quite a surprise. You haven't seen one for a long time. That's good to know. For me as well. I can't even remember the last time I've seen one in real life. Amazing to see that it's still wandering around there in the background. That's so cool. But technically speaking, we should be able to see them all over, really, in most of the locations of where we find them, of where we have the cameras. We should be able to see them. It's quite a widespread bird, and they range from the subtropical to tropical to more arid areas. So in most of our locations, at least along the southern African section, we should be able to see them. not a commonly encountered bird. Oh, that elephant, something's intentional demeanor. It looks like he's standing quite proud. Maybe there's another elephant approaching. Let's have a look. Seems ready. And the secretary bird seems unperturbed. So let's see. Now he's gonna. Whoa! Not sure if that was a combination of the flying insects, the fright from the dove, and the elephant. But this elephant, being a little bit younger and getting pushed around by his mates, probably wants to show how big he is to that secretary bird. And that's what we're seeing, I'm thinking. Canine girl, I agree. It's an amazing sighting. I always love it when elephants are in a little bit more adventurous mood, like this one. Looks like he might be taking or teaching birds some lessons here. Nothing as empowering as chasing the birds around when you're a big elephant. Lady Macbeth is saying, did you carry quills in your hair? I'm assuming, Lady Macbeth, that is either a question to Penelope, mentioning that she was named Secretary Bird, or you are asking the Secretary Bird. But it does look like quills. Those feathers protruding from the head gives them a very, very unique appearance. And then Robert Cole is commenting, saying that the elephant should give the giraffes a drinking turn. That, Robert, is something that I haven't. Oh, all of those elephants, they kind of like packed up and left at the same time, except for this guy. But the elephants tend to hug the water when it's hot. Ooh, look at that. What another unique way to utilize that trunk. Creating mist. And another elephant. And the secretary bird is still hanging around, clearly thirsty. Penelope Kenyon, you're saying that the elephants are making sure that the giraffes get a muddy drink. That's indeed true. These elephants have done a good job at muddying up this pool. And look at that. That elephant is carefully checking out that secretary bird. And the bird's also carefully trying to judge their reaction. Interesting situation to watch. Not something I can say I've seen regularly. Not something I ever recall seeing, actually. And then Sandy Franklin is asking if it's possible to set up a trip to see all the places we see on the shows. Sandy, I'm not sure about all of them, but I do know that a lot of them it is possible to see. And there is certainly a chance to book and see if you can travel there. And what an experience that would be, to be able to see the creatures would be very, very interesting to see. But I think it is indeed possible. And what a fantastic trip that would be. Imagine having a chance to go to one of these watering holes and literally sit in front of it physically and just watch the same. I'm not sure you might get the same good views that the Africam's giving us. One of the advantages of the effective use of technology, especially for observing animal behavior, is that it happens unintrusive and that we can witness behavior that we might not necessarily be able to see in our own time. And of course, features like the zoom on these cameras enable us to get up close and personal views of some of these animals, which we might not necessarily be able to do, depending on the area, the location of the watering hole. But it's certainly an amazing privilege we have. And what a way to enjoy wildlife while watching them enjoying themselves, like these elephants are doing. Penelope Kenyon, you are saying that you can see, I'm assuming you're saying that you can see secretary birds at Amakhala Game Reserve. I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can. Seems like it's well within their distribution range. But from very large elephants to the smaller creatures, I have just heard that there is some plenty little goslings at Elephant Pan. So I think let's head over there and check in on how they're doing. Just look at that. Also not what I was expected. This is very, very special actually. Out on the bank in the shade. Look how carefully they space themselves along the patches of dappled shade. And no doubt that's also what their downy coats are there for, providing perfect camouflage for these little birds, obviously unable to fly at this stage. So these Egyptian goslings or ducklings, well spaced in the darker patches. Look at that, quite a few of them. There's two, another three. Quite a successful brood this. About 10 or 11 of them in all. This is quite an interesting thing. This is a good example of how important the camouflage of little birds are when they're still exposed and less than capable. Of course, they spend some time out on the bank where they rest rather than in the water where they're a little bit more exposed. Interesting also to watch how they vie for their spaces. There's two of them, it's right in the sun currently. One's checking around, the other one's just laying down. It'll be interesting to see if he moves. Dappled shade provides them a chance to blend in. Sometimes I've even seen them right on the edge, the water's edge, in an overhanging bush or shrub with only a little bit of sunlight coming through, and that way they blend in perfectly in their surroundings and they're not as easily seen by lurking predators, which can be various. Have a look, going after some of the grass seeds. Robert Cole is saying, "Oh, so cute indeed. They're such pretty little birds. And they're quite reserved at this age. Even though there's already a little bit of competition going on amongst them here for shady patches, but they do tend to find solace and comfort within the group." Here's a nice stretch. Well, that one, you can see stretching its leg. It's probably been sitting down like that in the shade for a while. But these, we know, of course, when they grow up, they become somewhat aggressive towards others, or they can be. They become quite territorial over their water patches, and you can see it's quite interesting. They're quite far away from the water's edge, but it is very hot. And there we go, there's an adult. But it being as hot as it is, there's an interesting bird at the back. Here we go, there's the adults. Oh, there's more goslings. Oh my, quite a few, probably more than one female. The adults, of course, keeping a watchful eye while also foraging. But this time of the day, very, very hot. In an exposed pan like this, of course, the sun beats down and the glare also adds to it. There's a tree squirrel. Interesting little creature, also on the ground, looking for food. It's probably fallen. Interesting little guy. Go by a lot of names. Smith's bush squirrel, I believe, is the correct naming, or yellow-footed tree squirrel, just tree squirrel, smaller than its European and American cousins. Interesting. And the starling just came and chased it off. I'm assuming a virtual starling. Funny to watch these little interactions between the smaller creatures, the birds, and their mammal counterparts. We'll just have a look at all these little ducklings. It would be too hot, they'd be exposed in the water, so shades further away from the water, hence they're moving this side. Penelope Kenyon, you're saying so many and so camouflaged indeed. Just at that little patch there, I can count 10 of them. Actually, yeah, 10 of them. Here's another 3 or 4. Have a look. The adult's just going at that newly grown grass. Here's another one, 12. I know this is still the early stages of the game, but these guys, I'm pretty sure some of them will reach adulthood, especially under the watchful eyes of their parents. So Robert Cole, I hope that answers your questions as to where mom and dad is. Yuan O says mom and dad was on date night. Oh, date night, feeding on some grass and moving amongst the hundreds of children. It's amazing the level of parental care that these birds do show. Up until a certain stage, of course. And we can see going after some grass seeds. Also some grass itself, looks like. Canine Girl is saying, so lovely to see and so many, so very cute. Aha. One adult's gone to go lay down. I wonder if any of the younger ones might join it. And then Robert, you asking if the mom alarms if these little guys will run towards the or hide. So what does happen is these little birds they are quite reliant on their camouflage, and they are quite confident in it. So sometimes it depends on the situation, but in some cases they might just lay very, very still and hide in plain sight, and in other cases they might take towards the water if it's a threat from the land, or they might try and run away. It depends on the threat, really. Like, they're also quite exposed to raptors. Raptors, especially some of those that you might find in this Mopani woodland, especially tall Mopani woodland, like it looks like here around Elephant Pan. They might be a little bit more exposed in some senses, but them all huddling together like that makes it difficult to single one out. Ari, you saying it's beautiful and a lovely sighting of the small ones. Indeed it is. It's quite a few small ones. And have a look. The watchful eye of the adult, making sure that they are looked after, but constantly aware of what's happening around it. A little bit of preening. But then again, also, how many have I counted now? I think it's definitely more than 15 here of these little guys. Yeah, I'm not too sure exactly, but these guys can lay quite a lot of eggs. I think roughly around 20 or so, so it's not completely unusual to see this. And obviously various factors that will contribute to the hatching of all of them. So it looks like this has been quite a successful brood this far. And let's wish them all the luck they need. Egyptian geese, as they're known, quite formidable birds, tend to be rather noisy and rather insistent on holding a patch. I've even watched them countless times where they weigh themselves up against crocodiles, and you'll find that the croc might be out on the bank, and then these birds just keep going, keep shouting. Very, very funny to watch. Oh, that one's found a good spot to lay down and eat at the same time. It's a good place to be. Now it's interesting, it's quite open. There's a few grasses growing around here, but Mopani dropping its leaves annually, being also very high in tannins and other chemicals that deter some herbivores. They tend to clear the ground of any other potential trees other than Mopani. So you often find that the soils underneath Mopani trees are quite bare, and where you do find that they keep grasses, these grasses are often quite nutritious at a certain stage, normally the beginning, and sometimes well sought after by creatures like the larger grazing herbivores, buffalo, rhino and zebra. But tend to deter the growth of other species. And there they go. They're running to the water. Well, that's quite a small... Oh, that's quite very, very special to see. Have a look. All of them drinking, including the adult. That's very, very special. Canine Girl, you're asking what is the main contribution to the ecosystem? I'm assuming you're referring to these little birds. Well, they not only help in seed dispersal, of course, especially grass seeds. These birds eat mainly grass seeds, as we can see there. Look at them going to the little patches of green. Of course, they disperse of the seed through their dung that they drop, and that also provides them with a fertile little pocket to grow. But oh, it's a blacksmith lapwing in the background, another common visitor around the watering holes. But then these birds also not only aid in seed dispersal, but they also tend to promote the growth of new grasses. And they also function as a vital role within the food chain. And that was quite special to watch them all get up, go to the water, have a quick drink and a quick swim or waddle through it. I wonder if they'll go back to the water anytime soon. And then Madman from the UK is asking how many of these little goslings are gonna survive to adulthood. Oof, Madman, I think that's very, very difficult to say. Like, they spend about almost a fifth of their time evading predators, which is quite a lot if you think about it. Out of a 24-hour day, that's more than 4 hours a day that they might be exposed. And as they're walking like that through those open patches, they do stick out. Yeah, it's normally only one brood that they have, and they try to raise as many of them as they can. But they do have quite a good survival rate. or regarded to have quite a good survival rate. And for anybody, from what I've heard in certain parts, even in Europe, but anybody visiting most watering holes in Africa, at least southern Africa, their numbers are doing well. They're doing quite well. They're not, I wouldn't say that they've got any issue with their numbers dropping. Almost every single watering hole most South Africans can tell you is occupied by an Egyptian goose. At least one pair or two. And there's fierce rivalry amongst them and other birds. And sometimes even parks, little parks. Fascinating birds. Revered in Egypt at one point, hence the name Egyptian goose. Even made their way into the hieroglyphics. And a very beautiful bird. A duck, not a goose actually. Africa's got no native geese that I'm aware of. Most of the geese in Africa is either been brought in or bred and brought into Africa. And also another relative, the spur-winged goose, also called a goose but also a duck, one of the largest ducks, if I'm not mistaken, the largest duck in the world. Just have a look at them go. Hard to imagine that. What are they at? 15, so about 10 to 12 of them will make it to adulthood. And look at them go, picking at the grass seeds of those taller grasses in the back there. As they do that, of course, they also pick up quite a bit of insects, smaller insects. Oh, there we go. Instinctive behavior. When something spooks one, let's just run closer to the adults. Hopefully their obnoxious behavior might deter whatever's coming their way. And instinctively that adult just had a quick glance off to the side. It was probably nothing. Maybe the wind moving through something. Ever vigilant. Interesting, you can see the adults obviously being better covered with their feathers, are a little bit more prone to move in the shade, where the little ones every now and again move into the shady pockets where they hide. Oh, another squirrel here in the foreground, also following through. And this is what's so amazing about this, is that the squirrels are smaller rodents, arboreal rodents, but they do show quite a bit of resilience, especially for such a small mammal in this excessively hot area. You can see, look at it go through there searching for food, and also testament to all the life that's sustained by this unique landscape, the Mopani landscape. These older trees, even the elephant damage, provide the opportunity for homes for a lot of different creatures, hole nesting birds to small mammals and rodents and reptiles, not to mention all the uniquely associated plant life. And even though we don't often see it out in the open in the Mopani woodland, when we get the chance to look into it deeper, we can see it's very, very busy. And while those Egyptian geese are foraging, squirrels just move off. I think we'll move away from the beautiful elephant pan, and let's head back over to Oldonyo, where we still have a few elephant bulls. And just look at that. Yo, that is quite the sight. Look at that big bull second from the left. That looks like a very old big bull, that. And also making it known to the elephant off to his right. This is a sight. This is unbelievable. Amazing to think. You have to look at that size of that watering hole and you'd ask somebody, how many elephants do you think you can fit into it? 6 would not be the first number to pop up. Two standing in the water. Look at that large bull there. He's almost like in a trance with the water, but just making sure of his own personal space, but not in an overly obnoxious way. Canine Girl is saying that there's been some amazing sightings today and that it's bringing happiness to your day, and thank you to Mika as well for today. Very, very happy to hear that, Canine Girl. It is indeed been spectacular. I mean, sometimes I catch myself literally just zoning in on what these animals are doing, because I always love watching and staring and see those two younger bulls are pushing each other, and then that older one trying to drink there. Just had to get in on it, remind them that they're not the only two at this watering hole, so they're taking their game elsewhere. It's always interesting just to see how these animals are having their own little conversations with each other around the watering holes. Wildlife Lady, you're saying it's a fantastic sighting with the elephants, and I agree, this is truly spectacular. Watching these two playfully pushing each other while the others are just casually minding their own business. Looks like the one on the right even spraying out its mouth, washing its mouth out, probably just working it. I imagine from eating a lot of cannoniferous material and bark. At this time of the year, I can see, if we look in the foreground here, the grasses have browned again, so I'm sure some of these grasses have dropped their seeds, and that means that the elephants probably momentarily added a little bit of more browse to their diet again, which happens. It's a constant back and forth. However, during the rainier seasons, it's often that they tend to feed on a lot of grass, especially elephant bulls. And Wildlife Lady, you're saying you enjoyed live at the watering hole today. I'm very happy to hear that. And thanks for joining us. I also enjoyed it. Have a look at that. There is one resting on the backside of the smaller one in the water, giving those very strong neck muscles a bit of a break. While also probably encouraging that elephant in the water to move a little bit forward, share the space, I'm sure, even though he doesn't seem too bothered. Oh, look at that. Even though they're playing, I can't imagine that tusk to the right cheek for these two elephants in the front is too comfortable. And it just goes to show, like, imagine the gentleness such a large animal has to display to be able to not seriously injure each other. And that's why when these physical commitments become more intense, these animals of course have to either fully commit or back off. There's no half-heartedness. Half-heartedness leads to injury, and that leads to suffering and even potential severe outcomes out here in the wilds. And amazing to see that around these watering holes we have a contrast. When we have the animals gather around a valuable resource like water, and we have all these different outcomes. I'm always happy to see when it's quite gentle, like what we've been witnessing today. Just have a look at them playing, the older ones enjoying the water. It seems quite familiar. Quite familiar. Just a casual drink. But I'd like to thank all our viewers for joining us this afternoon. For the last few seconds, I'll leave you just